supervises the city and county of San Francisco, the Board of Supervisors hereby issues and authorizes the execution of the Certificate of Honor in an appreciative public recognition of distinction and merit for an outstanding service to the international community, my words. From the people and city and county of San Francisco, Leima Martinez, we honor you of the North American Department of the Cuban Institute of Friendship with the People on her visit and speaking tour in San Francisco and the United States. Thank you for your care and attention to the young people staying at the Latin American School of Medicine in Havana. We thank you for your commitment to education and we welcome you to our city. David Campos, President of the Cuban Institute of Friendship with the People and member of the Cuban National Assembly of People's Power, on her visit and speaking tour in San Francisco and the United States. Thank you for your long-standing advocacy of friendship and understanding between the people of Cuba and the United States, and welcome to San Francisco. Un abrazo.
Thank you so much.
I think that with that introduction, we should just begin to hear them, because I already took 10 minutes, and I think most of the people who are here are eager to hear you. And please ask all the questions you have. And I think that what I need to remind you.
Years after our first visit, I was at the time a student leader in Cuba. I was invited to come to 47 universities in the United States. And that's the time when we met many very good people here in the United States, representing the peoples of the United States. There's so many peoples that are here because of different reasons. One of them is here, our Professor Felix, and we have been supportive, we have been in solidarity with you, but you have been also very solidarious to Cuba, and we thank you for your example, for your courage, and for the way you, every time you go to Cuba, accompanied by different kinds of people, you are just allowing them to understand in a different perspective our reality. And it is why we are coming to the United States again, because we would like people like you and people in different communities here in the United States to really understand about Cuba today, to understand that we are a country where we achieved independence and sovereignty 57 years ago, and we are ready to keep it, we are ready to preserve it. What is happening today, that we rejoin diplomatic relations with the US government, it is a result of that resistance. It's the result of our commitment to continue building a socialist country 45 minutes away from Florida. It's a real challenge, we know that very well, but we will keep going with that decision. And of course, it is a positive thing that is happening, that many people from the United States is going to Cuba now. We, as the Cuban Institute for Friendship with the Peoples, we have very good experiences. Thousands of those visitors have been coming through our institute to Cuba, and I can tell you the majority of them are very respectful, and we hope that way to understand Cuba is the one that prevails in the present and in the future. Of course, for Leima, for myself, it is a pleasure to be here. We would like you to know that despite the rejoining of the relations, the diplomatic relations between Cuba and the US, still the blockade is there, is in place. Some people here, as far as we have been having different meetings, some people is confused about rejoining relations and the lifting of the US blockade. And I have to tell you in this very quick message, for you to make questions to Leima and to me, that it is the same situation. The new situation is that we have diplomatic relations, but the other part, the other aspects of the U.S. policy on Cuba are unchanged. The blockade is there. When we talk about the blockade, it is economic, financial, and commercial blockade against Cuba. It is under the law of the Trading with the Enemy Act, back approved here in 1917. It is how legally it is authorized to impose blockades like the one that is imposed to our country. And the blockade, in the exact words of the U.S. government at the time, it is to create discontent and to create the idea in the Cuban people that the responsible for the economic problems is the Cuban government. It is what the blockade is for, in few words. So it means that in 55 years of blockade, 57 years of the Cuban Revolution, we have heard for the first time a U.S. Secretary of State, it is John Kerry, recognizing that it is the United States the one that kept isolated in front of the international community. So as our Professor Felix was mentioning a few minutes ago, that's true, Felix. And it is not Cuba or Fidel or Raul who is saying that. It is the U.S. Secretary, State Secretary, the one that is saying we have a very huge failure in terms of the Cuban policy. So it is a very important moment. It is a moment where we need the people living here, the public opinion, all the activists involved in different networks here to know about this situation, this complex situation, where we rejoin diplomatic relations, but we consider this moment the process towards the normalization between Cuba and the U.S. We don't know how normal relations are between Cuba and the U.S. because we have been without relations, normal relations since, for 117 years now. So we know that we have to be creative, that we will be finding solutions to the different problems and obstacles. Other obstacles like the occupation of Guantanamo, for instance. More than a century illegally occupying our territory. And not only that, the prison that was opened there, and a few days ago the US Congress didn't approve the transference of prisoners to other territories, so it means that the President Obama cannot close the prison either. So it is a real obstacle for the process towards the normalization. Also, the regime change programs that are being financed by different state agencies from the United States against the Cuban Revolution, $20 million a year in order to finance those programs. Sending money to different groups in order to exercise opposition, to build dissidents. But if you receive money to say something in opposition to the government, are you a dissident or a mercenary? So we have to take into consideration all these kinds of things that and manipulations that are being said in the media here and in many other countries. In the case of Cuba, we are updating our economic model. We say we are updating. We don't mention that we are in reforms because for us to update is to keep the socialist model and to change those aspects of the socialist model that should be better. Recognizing that yes, we had mistakes, yes, the international economic crisis is affecting us, yes, the impact of the US blockade is there, so we have to continue despite all these circumstances, and that's why we are changing different aspects of the Cuban economic model. 500,000 Cubans are in self-employment now. It is a new aspect of our economic model. It doesn't mean that they are anti-Cubans or they are not revolutionaries. This is the same Cuban people that is with a very high quality life, that is with a very good training, You know, probably you know that we have free education for everyone, free, free, free. Not a coin to be paid because of the books or for accommodation or for whatever. No, no, no. It is free for everyone until university and postgraduate courses. We have free healthcare for everyone, and it is free. We cover everything. 54% of the Cuban national budget, it is to guarantee education, healthcare, and social security. So all these things are real achievements. And what we are doing now with the changes that we are doing in the economic aspect, it is to guarantee the sustainability to these achievements. Because no country can live with very good social achievements without the economic sustainability to those achievements. And that's what we are looking for. Yes, more Cubans are in self-employment, but at the same time, we ratify that the state enterprises are the ones that will guarantee the development of the country. The main means of production, the main technologies, the most important industries will be in the hands of state enterprises. Of course, we consider a complement, the individual, cooperative, and private experiences that are now increasing in amount in our economy. This year, we are expecting a growth of 4% of our gross domestic product. Yes, and it is not bad. We hope it could be better. We are also opening since the year 1995 for foreign investment, but now, a year ago, we updated the law to promote foreign investment. So it is necessary to clarify that no matter if it is a US investor or a Saudi Arabian investor or a Chinese investor, they have to look and respect the Cuban law on foreign investment. You can look to the webpage of the Foreign Investment Ministry of Cuba, and you will find a dossier, a very clear one, about 45 or 47 pages, and that's the very clear explanation, which are the fields that constitute a priority for us. So it is not that they are going with a luggage of dollars, just going wherever they want to go. It is not the case of Cuba. They have to look to where Cuba needs foreign investment. Then we decided one by one. It is not the case that the foreigners are coming and just looking to a Cuban down the street willing to do foreign investment. No, it is a country where we are a country with governance, with institutions, and it is one of the characteristics that we consider in our parliament is a safeguard for preserving our national interests in front of all kinds of foreign investments, not only in front of the US. Possible investors, because that's another thing. So far, President Obama have made a decision that yes, he will authorize technology companies to invest in Cuba, telecommunication technologies to invest in Cuba. That's fine. We are ready for that. We are not afraid of internet or Twitter or whatever. But it is complicated because that authorization made by the president needs some things to articulate, banks, accounts, and other permissions. For instance, Cuba is not authorized to use the US dollar as a currency. So, on one hand, we have positive rhetoric and goodwill, but on the other hand, we have still many obstacles. But if at the end of the day we solve those problems, Cuba will consider those proposals in the same way we consider many other proposals. We still, we already have in Cuba different experiences, very recent ones, but good ones regarding Wi-Fi hotspots in Cuba, more than 40 in different areas in Havana and in many provinces. It is new for us, but remember that it is the limitation for Cuba to have access to internet is the blockade. Cuba is not afraid to internet. It's the US government that has the prohibition to Cuba to connect directly to internet. So it is another obstacle that we have. We need to use a third way to enter to the internet. And you know that the 5 main NAPs for internet connection are under the control of the United States. It is real. It is the way it is in terms of internet and so on. So in Cuba, what we are giving priority is to the social use of internet. It is schools, hospitals, research centers. By the year 2018, we will be able to guarantee internet access for every classroom in Cuba. It is part of the goals of the program Connect 2020 that has been published by the Organización Internacional de Telecomunicaciones, Telecommunication International Organization, OIT in English. And then it is something that we are with a very important will to invest in our own in those areas, because we have the conditions, we have the human resources with good skills in order to deal with the new technologies. Some other countries have very good technologies access, but they don't have the human resources ready to deal with the new technologies. So in the case of Cuba, that's true that we are very obsolete, unupdated in terms of accessibility, but we are in a quite good shape in terms of skills. So I hope, and we are very confident that in the next 5 years, Cuba will be in a very good place in terms of internet access and internet use. And also the public administration in Cuba is giving a very good priority to that, because it is better to guarantee people's quality life when you apply informatics resources to many of the things that every citizen needs in every country of this world. We are aware of that. We are studying many other models and examples in the world, in the south, in the north, and we are taking advantage of those experiences. Some people is coming to Cuba to share with us some experiences, and I can tell you we are very confident on that. So in brief, until the blockade is lifted, until Guantanamo is not in the Cuban hands, until the regime change programs are not stopped, we will continue in the international campaign. And the main thing that we are asking our comrades or people in the world willing to support us is please to respect the Cuban sovereignty. It is the main aspect of everything what we are demanding to our friends and asking for solidarity, because in Latin America and the Caribbean countries today, it is the key position of all the Latin American and Caribbean states. We are all different in Latin America, but we decided to be in a process of Latin American and Caribbean integration. We know that we are very diverse. We know that each country is having a different model. Yes, that's good. It's not homogeneous, but we have decided to be independent, and that's the best way that we can produce the wealth, not only for our citizens, but also a better cooperation with other countries, including good cooperation with the US, with Canada, and with many other countries in the world. So I hope you could be interested in some other things, but I would prefer Leima to say something. She's very experienced with the LAM program, the Latin American School of Medicine, especially leading us on behalf of Icap with the US students coming from the different underserved areas of the US, going to Cuba to be trained as doctors, and they are returning, and some of them are still there with Cuba. So it's a pleasure for us to come here, and thanks Felix for receiving us. Thank you.
Kenia has covered the many topics that our government, together with our people, is having in Cuba. So as you can see, we are focusing on economy, we are maintaining the social projects, and we are keeping the collaboration we have with other countries. One of that collaboration we have, it is the Latin American School of Medicine, and we were very lucky that a New Yorker, Reverend Lucius Walker, the one who led the Caravan Pastors for Peace, he was the one who catch the idea that Fidel had to train different doctors in the world. It was very complicated to have U.S. students in Cuba because at that time the license that you have now to go to Cuba were not in place. A few people trust in the program and helped Reverend Lucius Walker to organize the first U.S. students to Cuba. Now we can proudly say that 134 U.S. students have been graduated in Cuba. They didn't have to pay anything for those studies, so they don't have debts at the end of the career. So most of them are focusing on family attention or family residence here, so that it is something that the communities here are needing. They manage both language, English and Spanish, so they will have the possibility to give attention to the Latino communities. Most of them are also from Latino communities or from different origins. So that is something that Cuba has helped to have. We learned that there was a need here in the United States of doctors thanks to people from U.S. that was visiting Cuba, friends of Cuba that in our daily talks they were asking how to change in a way the medicine was used or treated here, just focused on clients. You know that in Cuba we work with patients, and that is the idea that the 134 students have in their mind. And it is also very good to see when these students not only work here in the United States, because, well, the goal of the program is not to keep the doctors in Cuba, but that they go to their countries, and in this case to the United States. But they have done something very beautiful. You know that Cuba has helped in a few details. It is the blockade. For many years, these students have had difficulties in receiving the remittances that their families send to Cuba to their daily life. Cuba provides them everything, but as young people, they want to go to a party, they want to go to a movie, or they want to go to a different province outside of Havana, because while in Cuba, they want to feel like they know the more of the cities in Cuba, because we have urban areas and rural areas, and as medical professionals, they want to have the modern experience. So they need money for that, and these difficulties, the normal relationship that we are trying to achieve has affected them also. During the Bush period, some of them had to come back to the U.S. because the pressure was so much, it was so intense that a few of them said, well, I'm studying in a socialist country that the U.S. administration is not accepting. What am I going to do with the diploma? Am I going to hang it in the wall just for nothing? So it was very complicated for them. We were very proud that the majority of them overcome that situation, and that's why we have now the more than 100 students. Now in Cuba there are 100 of them studying, and I learned in one of the activities we do at Icap headquarters, we invite them to have meetings for them to to get to know each other, the different years they are, so as they, as a U.S. delegation, can work and help. You know that when they come back, they have to do the steps and all that. And we learned from them the work they are doing in Martin Baró clinic. They are there during the weekends helping the communities, and that is something that makes us feel very happy and proud that, well, what they are learning, they are putting it in the hands of the people that most need it. There are so many things, but we would like you to
This
ask.
is the first time that I'm learning more details about the blockade and the the hardships that go along with the blockade. So what would be the first step for that to not exist anymore? Like what could you explain a little
Yeah.
bit of that?
Thank you. Very good question. We have an infography that probably we can project it. First of all, he could authorize Cuba to use the US dollars as a currency. He could eliminate the conditions that we have today in order to buy few things here in the States. We have to pay in cash in advance, and the Cuban chips cannot be used for that kind of trade that we have, limited trade that we have with the United States. So Obama could have suspended those restrictions for Cuba. He could allow U.S. citizens to go to Cuba to receive medical treatment, for instance. That's another aspect that could be. Of course, he cannot allow tourism to Cuba because it is codified by law. He cannot allow U.S. people to go to Cuba just openly because it is codified by law. But he can allow, as well as he is approving licenses, he could allow people to go for medical treatment. What else, Leima? Many
Well,
other things
There are only 4 things he cannot do. The others
are open.
are open.
Yeah, there are many.
One of them is this, what Kenya is mentioning, that he cannot authorize U.S. people
Tourism.
to go on touristic programs. The other one is that he cannot authorize U.S. companies or companies in other countries to settle businesses in in the enterprises in Cuba that were nationalized in 1959. And there are other 2 that he cannot allow
It is the copy of the
U.S.
code.
companies to trade with the
Projected
Cuban.
in just a second.
Okay. Is
Ahora
it-
ahorita, que necesitamos una conexión.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I see them here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right in the bottom.
So he had some restrictions in approving companies in third countries to trade with Cuba. And something that Kenya was mentioning, and it is that he cannot eliminate the restrictions that, when Cuba is going to buy a product or something, we have to do it in cash and in advance. So he cannot, he had some restrictions to change that.
You can copy this if you want and just to.
It's in Spanish, but you are bilingual, so.
Many of you. Yeah, so it's a good question, but the main thing is that before he leaves the White House, some new decisions can be made in order to make better the situation and the human and economic damage of the U.S. blockade in our everyday life. We know that the U.S. Congress is the one that have to make the decision. And currently, there are different bills, about 15 different initiatives in Congress, in Senate, and also in Senate, in order to eliminate some aspects, the travel ban, trade, and many other things. And we have the information. Probably we can share it with Professor Felix, and you could have it, because one thing is to work in the constituencies here, to ask the members of the U.S. Congress and senators, please, to get involved in this kind of initiatives. It's a very important thing. Last year, last September, it was a very good initiative, days of actions against the U.S. blockade on Cuba, and many people went to the Congress, and they started to do advocacy work in order to ask them to support these kind of initiatives. Not only Democrats, but many Republicans received them, and they are active because of different economic interests. We know that they are not there supporting the Cuban Revolution. They are just looking for some particular interest, but right, it is the way it is, and it functions like that. So why not to understand that it could have some influence? in your Congress member decisions. That's the infographic.
So look, the four things he cannot change because it is in the hands of the Congress to change laws, right? Congressmen and women and senators are the ones who can change the Torricelli Act from 1992, the Helms-Burton in 96, the situation with the touristic trips to Cuba, and the forcing Cuba to pay in cash and in advance for the products that we buy from U.S., specifically agriculture. So it says agriculture, but we can buy other things, right? So he can extend that possibility. So here you have the many things he can do. He can authorize us to use the US dollars in the transactions, but there is a problem. Every time Cuba does a transaction with a foreign bank, those banks have problems. Last year, December 17th, the two presidents, Obama and Raul Castro, said to the world that they were talking to have a normal relationship and to looking forward the normal relationship and the diplomatic ties be reestablished. But since that moment till today, more than 3 banks have been fined for having financial transactions with Cuba because we used the US dollar. One of them from Germany, another one the Netherlands banks, another one from France. So they don't have anything to do with the bilateral relationship between Cuba and the US. Well, they do have something to do because this Helms-Burton law says, that is an American person, said that third countries cannot trade with Cuba. So the French bank didn't broke any law, any French law, and anyway they had to pay $1 million for having financial transactions with Cuba using the US dollar. So
800
the French
million.
people will say, hey,
What am I doing
what
with it?
about us? So, and more than, 191 countries in the world are saying the same thing at the UN. In last October, the 193 countries at the UN were voting for a resolution that Cuba presented to lift the embargo. 191 said that the blockade must be lifted, but only 2 said that they are against that resolution. Do you know who those people are? United States
And
and Israel.
it's only one vote.
Some of our colleagues in jokes and so on says United States and his province are states. Yeah, we have to react to those things. We have to laugh about those things. Otherwise, we haven't lasted so many years with this blockade. So we have to make some jokes about the situation. Well, this is the situation, but we are optimistic. Both of us and the 11 million people are optimistic because we are building a country. We are making the updating of the economic model, thinking of that the blockade will be lifted, or being ready for resisting that's not the word, but I don't have any other, a few more and plenty years more with these restrictions. Obama and his staff, 2 days ago, yesterday, the Secretary of Agriculture of the U.S. was visiting Cuba, looking for more information about what to do, what are the situation. Every time the secretaries of the United States go to Cuba, they find the same situation. Cuba is open, Cuba is ready, everything is there. People want to import products, people want to have more items from United States, but they face with this thing. Helms-Burton, Torricelli Act, the same. So they, every time they visit us, they come back trying to look for new solutions.
There's another. Again, there was you, and then.
Thank you. Gracias. Thank you for the opportunity to ask. You mentioned Guantanamo. I wanted to see what is the official position of the U.S. government. Why is it that they don't leave Guantanamo? What do they tell the Cubans? Why is it that they're still there? What is their legal argument?
Well, it is a historical situation when the Cuban government at the time was a government decided by the U.S. And then at the time, 100 years ago, they said that the day that the two governments agreed, the Guantanamo illegally occupied territory was going to be returned to the Cuban sovereignty. So a century after that, things are like you know. The Cuban revolutionary government is not that one of a century ago, and now we cannot find any agreement because they are opposed to return that territory. They are saying,
what is their excuse?
yes, but their excuse, sometimes they say it is the interest of the U.S., but some military sources here have said that it is not of their interest anymore. So it is a contradiction many times. Remember when the war on terrorism started, they have the prison over there. But now Obama is saying he would like to close the prison, and then the Congress opposed. They said, no, we don't allow you to transfer the prisoners to other countries, so the prison is also open over there. They pay to Cuba, how much, Leima? 4,000 pesos or dollars every year for the rent of that territory. We won't accept it. We don't receive that
We receive the check, but we don't.
yeah, we receive, but we don't cash it. That's the situation. And it is, we want to achieve the victory in that aspect by legal means
Is there a rental agreement?
at the time, but not updated by the Cuban Revolution, but more than a century ago. Yeah. No, it's a crazy thing. And also, it is one of the most valuable bays that we have in Cuba. The economic value of the bay, of Guantanamo Bay, is huge. So imagine, not only the blockade, that is enough, but also the occupation of Guantanamo. It has been a really handicap for our development. So that's no reason. Now we are having an international seminar in Guantanamo in a few weeks, from the 22nd to the 25th of November, and we are increasing awareness about the need of returning Guantanamo to the Cuban sovereignty, because that's a very strange situation. We have good talks with the U.S. part in terms of keeping the area just without violent situation and so on, because we don't want that area to be hostile. So we keep, a normal and civil situation over there, but it is a very no way out situation, really.
Okay, thank you. So one question, and then the compañero, and then you.
So, with education being free, and I would imagine, I know everyone in this room would take advantage of it if it were free. So the first part of my question is, what percentage of the Cuban youth take advantage of education? To what level would they go? And then the other part is, how does the Cuban society absorb their skill sets? Are you able to find them jobs, or do you utilize your great internationalism to utilize that expertise that is developed?
Okay. So it's true, education is for free, and we take advantage of that. Yeah. More than 1 million Cubans have been graduated, university graduates, over the 50 years of the revolution, and we are 11 million people. So a lot of people go for university careers in many profiles, sectors, fields. And it is not only that university is free of charge, but most of the postgraduate courses are also for free. In the case of doctors, the residency and the specialties are free. So you can become a neurosurgeon for free. So you can be a plastic surgeon for free. I mean, all specialties, but I'm mentioning the ones that here are more expensive, right? So that is something that our people have learned to have. Unfortunately, in the case of doctors, you know that there is a program allowed by the State Department here that says that if Cuban doctors are in Africa, for example, they can go to the U.S. Embassy and ask for residency here in the United States. So that affects, that is brain drought? Brain drain, right? First. But second, it is affecting Cuba, that's true. But it is affecting those countries because those communities have never seen a doctor in their life. So if you took a professional that is willing to go to that place, you're affecting the medical situation of that country. So just because in a paper says that Cubans have a priority, so it is not only, again, affecting the bilateral relationship. It is true that some young people go to other countries to look for an improvement in their professional careers, but in Cuba we are also giving more opportunities to get to that professional level our students want after they are graduated. And we have research centers in biotechnology and in different other social sciences. And with the foreign investments that we are receiving, our young people will also have the possibility to be hired in those institutions and companies that goes there. In the case of skills and finding jobs, when you are graduated, you receive
a ballot
yeah.
to be
You are appointed to go to a place where you must stay 2 years in the case of men and 3 years in the case of women. So that is guaranteeing you a job after you are graduated. You can switch position after those years, or if you have a place that you did your training while you were in the career, you are allowed to go to that place where you did your training. So in that way, you can guarantee that the young people is having a job. It is true that sometimes people is not in the place they like, but first, that is a social commitment you have with the places, because if everybody wants to go to the capital city of the country, everybody wants to go to the job that it is paying you more or that you have more skills developed, but you have to balance. You have to send people to the rural areas. You have to send people to the communities that it is needing this kind of professionals. So the Ministry of Education, together with the Ministry of Work and Social Security, every year they do like a planning. So what are the needs of the community? What are the needs of the different institutions, so that graduates are not just studying a subject just because, no, studying something that will be needed in the country. And in the case of internationalism, Cuba started internationalism even before the triumph of the revolution, because Jose Marti is the first internationalist. He was here in the States, he was in the Latin American countries serving to the people with his knowledge. In the case of the medical brigades, since the beginning, we didn't have enough doctors, and anyway we sent doctors to Chile, to Algeria, to Africa, to other countries. And in that training and formation, it is how we get to this year with the help of a group of doctors that dare to face.
Yes. So first of all, I want to say thank you for coming and welcome to San Francisco State University. And so I wanted to bring up a question regarding ELAM. So I know that a lot of Latin American students, students from different parts of Latin America, from what I heard, are now being charged some type of tuition. It's not, very expensive, but there's some families are being charged tuition. And what I'm wondering is, how are these new changes going on in Cuba, and like the relations between Cuba and the United States, how that's going to affect the future applicants for ELAM? Because there are a lot of, students of color that look for resources like ELAM, to study medicine. And that's my question.
Well, first of all, Leima was speaking about the ELAM program and how is it currently. We have people from 118 countries currently. 80% of them have free scholarships. 80%, 80. So the other 20% are paid by their governments. The governments pay to the Cuban government in order to have those students. So it's a combination of resources, because in our case, we are investing in improving and renovating the accommodations at the universities. They are not in a very good shape because of the impact of the special period, because of the impact of the blockade and many other things. So if you know Cuba, or you have someone that is familiar to you, you know that some of the students, we guarantee free scholarship, but at the end, they were willing to live in a house, in a community, paying some dollars, or CUC in that case, for them not to live in the accommodation because of the situation in the accommodation, in the dormitories that we guarantee for free. So these things are new for us, and we are combining the two things. What we are committed is to guarantee the same quality, and Cuban higher educational system is very, very riguroso in terms of the results of each student. We are not going to make any difference between the free scholarships and those going to Cuba paid by the governments, or 105 or 110 people, individuals that are being paid by their families, but it's just 110 people, and then more than 30,000 now coming to Cuba for free scholarships. So the difference is huge, but it's a result of some things that we are changing in that model of South-to-South cooperation. At the end, many of the governments were paying thousands, millions of dollars for some of those students to go to the former metropolis in Europe. So in the new moment, some of those governments started to ask Cuba, well, we know you don't have many resources to guarantee free scholarship for everyone, but why don't we work in sending our students, paying part of the scholarship, and you to share what you need to invest in that. Another exercise is to send Cuban professors to different countries in the South, and there we establish School of Medicine and in many other areas, and it is another very good aspect. Of course, the relations between Cuba and the U.S. is not affecting any of the internal decisions of Cuba. Our internal situation is not in the table of negotiation. It will never be. It is internal decisions of Cuba. Our foreign policy, for instance, is unchanged. It is our foreign policy, and it is one of the characteristics of the foreign policy of Cuba. So in the future, we know that Cubans are having already the possibility to come to the States to study. And some Cuban institutions and individuals are applying for that. That's good. We are not afraid of that either. So it is going to be a new dynamic in the relations between Cuba and the United States. We understand that some of the motivations for the scholarship programs here are different to the ones we do. But we are not afraid of that. We understand that Cuban peoples are similar to you, similar to everyone here, and many of them will return to Cuba. Some of them will stay here in the United States. That's a dynamic. And we understand that the main thing we could do in order to guarantee our development is to prepare the majority, the 100% of the Cuban young persons to be ready to be trained, to have very high quality as a human resource, and then to stay in Cuba, or if they go out, to return to the country with better preparation in order to help us in that development. It is my opinion on that.
Okay. You're next, then Felipe, then you, then you.
I feel tengo que ir. Tengo que hablar, tengo una teleconferencia, me parece. Después de ella, me dijiste yo.
Ella se puede
Felipe
tomar.
dice, and then you. Yeah. Okay.
Me?
Yeah.
I have a question in relationship to real estate. I
To?
was- Real estate, buying and selling of property?
Real estate.
Yeah,
Comercial, estado real.
okay.
La venta y compra de casa.
Exacto.
Bienes raíces.
Yeah.
Bienes raíces.
Viene raíces.
Yeah.
So I went to Cuba 3 times with Professor Felix 10 years ago, and one of the things I remember being, a maybe common complaint in Havana was the lack of housing.
Yeah.
And one of the changes that I've heard has happened since then is the possibility to buy and sell property. And I feel really fuzzy on how that's played out, or how it's playing out. I heard a few people interviewed in the video that seemed quite ambivalent about that process. So I'm just kind of wondering if you could speak to what's been happening. Or is it happening? Are people buying and selling their houses?
It's a very dynamic process. Yeah.
In that case, what in Cuba we used to have is not exactly buying and selling houses, but we were switching, moving.
Se
But
permuta.
how do you say that in English? Moving in?
Switching.
Switching?
Houses in the
Okay,
past.
so in the past, we used to do that. There was some regulations that 3-4 years ago were changed, and now people are in the possibility of selling their house, but still you cannot, if you have one house or something, I mean, you cannot be homeless. So it is not a policy of the Cuban government to provide policies so as to have homelessness.
Homelessness.
Yeah, in Cuba. So, for example, there are some areas that are the most interest ones. Vedado, what you call downtown?
Downtown, Havana.
So a lot of people wants to live there, but anyway, you can sell it if you have it in the beach, in the country, or in the city. And that is a transaction that you just have to pay taxes for buying or selling. You and the person that is going to buy your house, you arranged the price, and you just have to go to a lawyer to do the necessary paperwork. In the case of realtors, there are a lot of people that for many years they had that job, and now as part of the updating of the economic model, that specific job is considered in one of the self-employment that Kenia said. So the local administrations will receive taxes for buying and selling, and also for the license that this person has to have for having that kind of job.
But they're just selling Cuban to Cuban, not internationally.
Of course,
Right,
if you are a permanent resident in Cuba, you are allowed, because when you are permanent in Cuba, you are like a Cuban in front of the law. You can buy, you can sell, you go to the hospital for free, and so on. So we don't sell the land to the foreigners. The Cuban land belongs to the Cuban people, so the houses are in that process, but not the land. Is the difference, okay?
The same happens not only with the houses, or the same is happening with transportation, cars, and that other properties that people have.
Sí, bienvenido.
Gracias.
Mi abuelo era cubano, jugador de béisbol, pero quería decirle que
Industriales.
sí, y era también el, ¿cómo se dice? Manager de los cubanos nacionales béisbol team. Pero le quería decir sobre el bloqueo. Una organización que se llama Education International, no sé si la conoces, Education International. Es una muy grande organización de 170 países, 170 countries, y son activistas. Y la presidente de NEA, National Education Association, is the vice president of Education International. They take on issues like this. They're meeting next week in Belgium. So if you were, I can give you my card. I've been on their board for 7 years. Pero this is an issue that we would be interested in because we are educators from all over the world, and we just had our World Congress in Canada. It's a very important issue because I think the faculty and students and people across the country do not realize the information that you just provided esta noche. Nosotros nos damos cuenta de esta información que ustedes nos han dicho esta noche. So, le voy a dejar mi tarjeta porque tengo una junta sobre el teléfono para NEA ahora. Y también le quiero decir que I've been a federal lobbyist for 7 years for National Education Association. Y el problema, lo más grande, es Congress. No es Barack Obama, it's Congress. They don't do anything, and it's horrible. And so, lo que yo siento es que tienes que ir por estas organizaciones políticas, uniones, que van a poner esa fuerza ahí al Congreso de los Estados Unidos. Y Lily habla con el presidente Obama mucho, todo el tiempo. So, si usted quiere, ella va a Belgium next week. Y ya le hablé reciente sobre maestros en México que están poniendo en la cárcel por dando su opinión sobre las cosas de educación en México. Y la otra cosa que quería decir, nada más que porque mi colega aquí habla de Guantánamo, y Senator Feinstein, who's the most senior senator of California, one of the most senior senators of the United States, wrote an opinion piece in the New York Times recently to close Guantánamo. I don't know si lo viste o lo leíste en the New York Times. Ella escribió sobre cerrando, pero le voy a dar mi tarjeta porque tengo una conferencia que empezó a las... Sí, a ver si podemos escribir una carta.
Profesora, y tenga usted la nuestra.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much. Gracias.
Ok, gracias.
Que vaya bien, nos vemos.
Suerte.
Sí. It's Felipe and then you. Yes, and then you.
Hi. Thank you both so much for being here tonight. I really appreciate it. My understanding is that Cuba recently developed a vaccine against lung cancer. I was wondering, does Cuba plan on sharing the vaccine with other countries? And do you think that the diplomatic negotiations or the blockade with the United States will change because of the vaccine? Or something like the vaccine? Yeah.
We are in a very good negotiations in order to allow the vaccine to enter to the United States. We'd like that to happen because it is needed here in the U.S. It is also a way to show to the U.S. people that the blockade is not only affecting Cuba, it's also affecting the United States. And of course, we have to deal with different ways how to produce the vaccine, the different tests and other aspects of the policy in order to allow a vaccine to come in. But yes, we are open to that. And of course, it is the Ebola diplomacy. I don't know how many names in New York Times and in many other media here, but why not? I think it is going to be a positive signal for the conversations because it shows that despite the political and ideological differences that we have and that we will be having in the future, we have many areas of cooperation and it is one of them. Why not?
There is another vaccine that will be also useful for the U.S. population, and it is a vaccine for diabetic ulcers, diabetic food. So this vaccine that our researchers have produced, it is preventing the amputation of members of different. So it is another thing that we can work on the future. I think that the governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, announced yesterday or the day after, I don't know. I mean, he visited and he had some conversations with our president, and he expressed the will of having the vaccine in New York. He had some conversation with his staff and people, and things were stuck. But now he's announcing that, again, that he will be open to receive the vaccine. You have to follow the news to see.
Thank you so much.
Felix, he asked my question.
Oh.
That was my question about
That was your question.
Thank you.
Gracias,
Good
Adolfo.
question.
También ayuda a Cuba.
Hi, I have a question about like the environmental and health kind of related stuff. So I know the U.S. is kind of notorious for pollution and also having really unhealthy things that are especially damaging, I know, in communities of color and contribute to obesity here. Since you'll be accepting goods from the U.S., are you going to regulate certain products, like especially things that are kind of toxic? I know sometimes pajamas have like flame retardants in it. We have a lot of chemicals that the FDA allows but aren't necessarily safe long term or haven't been tested, GMOs, things like that. Will you allow those in Cuba?
Well, of course, we have a very strong environmental laws in Cuba. In the future, if it happens that the U.S. companies are coming, of course, we will be ready to strengthen our legal framework in order to be more protected. But so far, for instance, we don't sign any free trade agreement with any country in America. It means that if we have good bilateral agreements, that's the best way for Cuba. So far, we haven't accepted genetically modified products. We have a very organic agriculture, and it is the result of the circumstances and it is the result of consciousness, the two things together. Because the circumstances are the blockade, the lack of technologies and machines for the agriculture and many other areas. But of course, in the way to survive, we understood that it is the best way to do things, to use organic products and to teach our farmers and the Cuban people, because we have urban agriculture also in the urban areas, we have very good experiences that the world have recognized as a very sustainable one in order to involve our population producing food. It is sustainable, you save money, probably you earn money because you sell it, and then it is your product, so it is a very good result of that. Of course, we don't use pesticides in our agriculture. We are learning more and more. There are some UN agencies that are supporting Cuba with some programs. El programa de Naciones Unidas para la Alimentación, the Food Agency for the United Nations, is investing in different cooperations programs in Cuba. I hope we are going to be stronger the day that the blockade is lifted. But if not, this exchange with the U.S. and with the people here that is involved in those campaigns is very good, because it is an alert for us to tell us why and what not to accept those products in Cuba. It is a very important thing, and we thank you if you send us information and all kinds of things that are better for us, because we have no culture about the U.S. products, because we haven't been consuming U.S. products at all. We have been consuming films and so on, but not products because of the blockade. So that's another reason that I'm very frank with you. We don't have many experiences on that, but of course we are clear, and our frame, legal frame is very, very strong in front of that.
Yesterday in the United States, there were protests around the country for a $15 minimum wage and a union. And my friend Isaiah is a fast food worker. He was on strike yesterday. He's right here. And I'm a Walmart worker, and we joined with this group of people from where I work. And I was just wondering, since
that if you don't produce more, you cannot increase the salaries of the population. So the updating of the economic model that we were talking have different policies to increase the salaries of the workers. One of those is the self-employment, that some people are having their own businesses and they hire others, so they pay taxes for the workers they are hiring, and they are developing that business. The cooperatives, that is another incentive for workers, because they are putting, they are applying the knowledge and professional skills they have, and they are sharing the incomes of that business. So if they work collaboratively, they will earn more money, they will have their needs covered. And in the state enterprises, there is another policy, and it is Resolution 17. And that resolution is saying that the budget of the enterprise must be managed by the enterprise, because we are decentralizing the powers of the national structures up to the local institutions. So the workers in an open assembly, they know about the budget that the administration is presenting. So the workers are the ones who agree or not with what the administration is presenting us. This is what we earn, these are our profits, this is how we are going to distribute it. I have to say that at Icap, in our institution, we have to do the same thing. The administration have to present it. No, literally the administration and the union.
She's a union leader.
And the union, we discussed, now we consider that in this area we should invest more in the facilities or in the computers, because we are receiving a lot of groups from US, so we need an extra computer. So details that the administration covers the general thing, but not the detail. And with this 17th that resolution, that it is for the enterprises that make profits, money, they can distribute the profits. They have like a scale or evaluation process. So you as a worker, you came to work every day early, you fulfill the objectives and so on. So it is kind of an evaluation that at the end of the month, you, besides receiving your salary, you receive more money. And you can receive more and more if if all workers push forward to produce. And that is changing the life of the workers in Cuba, because for many years some of our enterprises were not efficient, so that affected the workers, and this is a new incentive for them. We met yesterday with some of the colleagues that were on strike. They gave us this. So every country has to solve the problems according to the internal situation. We hope that you can solve yours the way you find the best. I don't know if you were. Did I cover the question?
Well, I think you just wanted to add to it.
Do you guys have minimum wage out there?
250 pesos is the minimum in Cuba. But according to the new process, it is the minimum. You could have higher and higher incomes depending on your production.
Oh, okay.
And also we increase the salaries for the doctors, and because it is a key area where we want to stimulate the doctors to be present in the different areas,
Right.
but also because of the incomes for Cuba when we export medical services to some countries where we are exporting those services also. It's a combination of actions. Free cooperation with many countries and exporting services in that area. Another thing has to do with the young people that is going to the workplace, they have a salary guarantee since the very beginning. When they pass the 2 or 3 years in social service, they start to scale in the different salaries. But women wins the same salary for the same job than the men. It's not any distinction in the case of Cuba. That's a very important thing. And more than 90% of Cubans are unionized. And in the case of the self-employee sector, 87% of them are already unionized. It means they are participating, they are part of the political participation in Cuba. It doesn't mean that they are not revolutionaries and Cubans active in the updating of the economic model. So it's a very important thing that they are very well protected, of course.
First of all, thank you so much to both of you for enlightening us about the situation in Cuba. As came to us. Also, I was doing this thought experiment. I was thinking to myself, if instead of you, we would have had representatives from Honduras, for instance, and the Dominican Republic, or any other combination, Guatemala, El Salvador, Panama, even Mexico, southern Mexico, right? And we would ask them the same questions. Is education free? Is healthcare free? What are the indexes of infantile mortality? Where, for instance, in Central America, are all the MDs? Right? They have specialties like plastic surgery and so forth. And they're in the urban areas. The MDs that are serving the indigenous populations are Cuban. In all of the countries that I mentioned. So, I was gratified, because at my age, sometimes, one tends to become cynic, and one tends to become very pessimistic about where socialism, for instance, is going. But listening to you, my hope for socialism was revived. I feel optimistic, and in the presence and in the context of all these young people, I feel rejuvenated. And I have, Felix doesn't like this. I don't know how he is. But it was thanks to Felix that I went to Cuba about 7 or 8 times. And it was probably one of the most marvelous experiences that I ever had. So, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much.
Thank you. Professor, we say that you are accumulating youth. Yeah.
Roberto, distract me, so I lost. Yeah. And then you. Tony.
My name is Tony Ryan, and I was a member of the 1st Venceremos Brigade in 1969. And our host was Icap.
Yeah.
From day one. And I wanted to just thank the compañera's presence, but also our dear friend Felix. Those of you who are his students are very lucky. He's a very, very good man. I've been a student of his, but in the street. He and I worked very closely mostly around Central America issues, especially in the 1980s, and I have a very high regard for him. But I want to say this is very impressive, and I'm very pleased to be here myself, and this is really exciting. I did go many years ago to San Francisco State, but I don't remember a crowd like this in the classes that I was in, and I think it's really, really wonderful. What is being said here in this dialogue, as we said in the brigade many years ago, go to Cuba, see for yourself.
Right.
All of you, all of you. And that the way we're going to break the blockade is by hard work, pressure, alliance with other forces, business people, religious people, various other people, and that we have to respect and understand that there are differences naturally. A business person really doesn't care about whether socialism exists in Cuba. Perhaps they don't want to see it. But they want to have trade and relations with Cuba, and that's increasingly important. Those of us that support and defend socialism will do that, and we continue. The Cubans will continue to do that. It's already been made clear there's no intent. It's to improve socialism, not to reform it or change it. And that what we're looking at now is a real fork in the road, and that there are certain things that President Obama can do and certain things that he can't, just as was outlined. But we need to make sure he can do those things and put pressure on him. But also we need to deal with the Congress to repeal the Torricelli Act, to repeal the Cuban Adjustment Act, and the so-called Helms-Burton legislation. Thank you.
Before the next question, I wanted to say to Tony Ryan that this year we received the 46th contingent of the Venceremos Brigade, and we are organizing the 47th. And we would like to invite you for the 50th anniversary of the Venceremos Brigade, because we want that group of friends to celebrate that moment of the initiation of groups that were against the blockade here and challenging the blockade from the United States. Thank you.
Next year they are going to Guantanamo, next July. So please contact them. It is going to be a very good trip to Cuba.
Compañero,
Buenas tardes.
Buenas
Yeah, it
tardes.
was just basically to find out about the Cuban Five. What are they doing? Whether it's a legacy or something that you could talk about the whole experience in
Yeah.
a few minutes.
Of course.
Thank you.
Well, the Cuban Five are doing very well. You know that Adriana and Gerardo had a very beautiful baby. Her name is Gemma, and she was born on January the 6th. So she's about to have a year, next January. And Fernando Gonzalez is one of the deputy presidents of Icap. We are very proud to have him every day with us, going and visiting and receiving many friends of Cuba from all over the world. They have been able to visit Venezuela, Ecuador, Bolivia, Chile, mainly the Latin American countries, but also they went to South Africa, Angola, and Namibia because of a symbolic reason. 3 of the 5 went to Angola to fight apartheid. So now they return to thank the people there that were in the struggle. As a summary of a total amount of letters, they received 27,000 from 69 countries of the world. They received letters, and for instance, Antonio Guerrero went to Vietnam last September in a delegation we sent for the Asia Pacific Conference in Solidarity with Cuba, and he was able to meet with 2 Vietnamese that studied with him 30 years ago. And we witnessed that moment where he rejoined with his friends and brothers, like he said. So these are very inspiring moments, and everywhere they go, they thank you all. I'm doing that, in fact, because it is a very important thing that they are very thankful. They cannot come to the United States. That's why they asked us to everyone asking here about them, to tell you that they are very committed with the struggle of the peoples here in the United States. They are very supportive of many other political prisoners here, Oscar Lopez Rivera, Leonard Pertier, Mumia Bujamal, and many others. And of course, that they are very confident in the new victory against the U.S. blockade and all the other topics that we have been talking about.
Compañero, and then Jaime.
I'm struck by the calmness and confidence in which you've presented what in fact it's a very difficult situation, trying to figure out, how to deal with a new situation. But you get a sense from your presentation of the confidence and strength of the Cuban Revolution. No, there's no panic. Oh God, what are we going to do? None of that. Here's what we'll do. Here's what the scene is. Here's what we can do. Here's what we can't do. Here's how we'll go forward. It's quite impressive. A real strength. Much has been accomplished by the medical brigades. Many people know a lot. I think the brigades that went to Liberia and Sierra Leone went to where people had Ebola, right in the most dangerous places, was seen and absorbed by the world in a way that probably other things have not. And there's one I would like to talk about if you could, because it's not known in the United States, and that was the response of Cuba to the disaster at Chernobyl, in what was then still the Soviet Union. And if you could talk about what was done, because very little is known about it, and it's an enormous accomplishment, an enormous contribution to humanity that was made.
Thank you. Thank you for asking. Yeah, there was that nuclear disaster in Ukraine, and Cuba decided to, as far as we knew that was happening, we welcomed more than 20 people, mostly 20,000, sorry. 20,000, mostly kids with their mothers and with their relatives in Cuba. They were lodged, accommodated in a place that the environment helped them to recover from the lesions, bruises, lesions that they had, and they received treatment. But that also put a challenge to our doctors, because we had experience in other situations, but not in this specifically. So our research centers focus on how to treat them and how to help them. Our Cuban people get involved so much with these relatives, with this person, that now they are like relatives. They communicate with them. Those kids not only received treatment, medical treatment in Cuba, they studied in Cuba, they learned Spanish in Cuba. So for more than 20 years, they stayed in Cuba trying to recover from that situation. The program was in a process, ended, had a peak of the receiving the people, and then they are returning little by little to their homeland. And some of them will train in Cuba. They studied university careers, and the idea is that they go again. Out of a sad story, they come out with positive experiences, so that they can come back and help the people in their communities. Hopefully not with this kind of disaster, but with many other situations. Is that?
That's good. Thank you.
Jaime? Compañera, for the benefit of, I think, most of the students here, you could say, who were the Cuban Five? What was the significance of the Cuban Five? Why was it an important case for Cuba? I think most people here, most of the students here may not know about this case.
We could have another conference. Bye, thank you. Well, the Cuban Five were 5 Cubans that were in prison here for 16 years. They were in prison in 1998 because of the work they did in order to infiltrate terrorist groups here in the United States, specifically in Miami, because Cuba has suffered from the state terrorism sponsored by the U.S. government. 5,577 victims of U.S. terrorism. It means that every 4 blocks in Cuba, we have one victim of state terrorism. And that is why, not matter the different efforts that the Cuban government have done at the time in order to present a proposal to cooperate with the US government against terrorism, in June 1998, the FBI sent a delegation to Cuba. We shared information with them about the terrorist groups here in Florida, and it was in June. And then in September the 12th, 1998, the 5 were put in prison, and the terrorists are still free. Now the 5 are free, but they pay 16 years of prison. And Posada Carriles, for instance, someone that is unfortunately from Cuba, but in El Salvador and in many Central American countries, he is a real mastermind of many, many terrorist acts. He recognized that he was one of the authors of the bombing of a Barbados plane. It means a Cuban civil plane that was blown up in 1976, and with 73 persons, civil persons on board, and they all died. It was a disaster in the civil aviation in this world, and nothing happened. So Posada Carriles is free. In Miami-Dade, he's receiving many awards almost every week, and then the 5 Cubans. But at the end, they don't feel any kind of regret, because they did what it was needed to be done. And they denounced, and in fact they stopped many new terrorist acts to happen against the Cuban people. But also they preserved lives here in the United States, because in many cases the Cuban 5 were able to denounce attempts of terrorism against the people of the United States. So it is a long history. I don't think we have time to speak about that, but it was a very important page about solidarity with Cuba. They didn't accept any kind of negotiation with the government of the United States. At the beginning, they offered them many opportunities to bargain freedom and to say, okay, I will negotiate. I don't want to go to a trial, but they say we will go to the trial. We will denounce all the terrorism against Cuba. That's what they did, and one of them received 2 life sentences plus 15 years of punishment. So it was awful, but on December the 17th, the 5 were free, especially 3 of them that still remain in prison at the time. And now we can see that that's the demonstration that when you are strong, when you are united, when you coordinate international solidarity, when you have something to defend, you win. And it is the experience of the 5.
I do want to ask you if you can comment about the challenges about culture, music, and this experience how.
Yeah.
So I recently read that the majority of the cars that you guys have are from before the 1950s. Is that
Not the majority. Not the majority. They are the ones that the U.S. visitors are having more pictures of.
That's what I
We have few of them, but not the majority of the cars. The majority are from Russia, from the Soviet Union.
Those are mostly in the touristic areas.
In the touristic
because
areas.
it calls the attention
like the
of
taxis and stuff, right?
taxis and all
Yes,
that.
yes.
American people trying to take pictures of forts.
Yeah, imagine.
They are making.
Yeah. And it is a very good question, because it is connected with the challenges. Well, we all, not only Cubans now because of the situation, but we have been living under a cultural war. You all know that very well. We received the invasion of the media, of many things. And one thing that we have very clear is that Cuba is not going to face that war with prohibitions. We are ready, and we have been preparing our people to think by ourselves, to really decide on our own decisions and what do we want for us. Another thing is that we know that the cultural resistance is one of the things that will protect the Cuban traditions in front of this war. And of course, not to be afraid of that, but to be alert that we should preserve our traditions. For instance, there is a very important debate in the touristical industry, in Parliament, in the Union of Artists and Writers. We don't want to present a culture for tourism. We want to present the culture. That's a different thing, you know, and we are debating on that. We don't want the Cuban women to become an object in front of the tourist eyes. We want them to see us like we are, you know. So this economic impact of the crisis, of the blockade, of course it has created differences in Cuba, of course. But Cuba is decided to continue applying different public policies in order to reduce those impacts and to protect the human beings. And it is something, when you give access to the people to culture, not only consider the right to read, making us stronger in front of that. I believe that many Cubans are just, you know, going through the eyes of the movies of the American way of life. Yes, it happens. We are not an exception. In Cuba, 80% of the movies are coming from the US. And in one hand, it is not going to happen what happened in the Soviet Union, that they discovered the Donald Duck and Disneyland and so on. No, no. We know about that since the very beginning of those icons of the US culture. But we also know about Mark Twain, and we also know about Spielberg films. I remember once when Spielberg went to Cuba, we were all at the Karl Marx Theater. Imagine 5,000 Cubans in a theater with Fidel and Spielberg. Imagine, it was amazing. I cannot forget that. Let me remember now. And then Fidel standing in the front of the theater. Oh, Spielberg, we are very pleased to have you here. One question to the crowd, huh? How many of you have been able to see 5 Spielberg films? Everybody has it. How many of you have seen 14 or 15? Well, many people. Could you come here to tell him about his films? And many people went, just telling Spielberg how do we like it or not. Another person that is very famous is the author of Sitcom. Michael Moore and many others. Arnold Schwarzenegger is not very famous. It's very famous. It's not very sympathetic for us. But I mean, just few examples to tell you that in Cuba, through legal means or through illegal means, we know about many of the U.S. productions, House of Cards and many others. I don't know what else, many other series. And we are confident. We know that there are many challenges because U.S. consumerism is very present in many countries, even in Cuba. Cuban people like to be in fashion, you know, to wear things. That's normal. We are Latinos. Yeah. To be clear that we are not talking about a glass of ¿cómo se dice? Una campana de cristal, eh? We are in this world. We are connected to a globalized world. But our challenge is how to preserve our Cubania and also to be open to these new developments of the world. I think we can, and we will be ready to face that. Why not? If we make mistakes, we will correct them because we are the owners of our country. It is nothing from outside, no one from outside coming to tell us what to do. So it's the decision.
So I was wondering if you could speak to how that happens in popular education, because a lot of us here are ethnic studies majors, and so or have graduated from the College of Ethnic Studies. But for a lot of folks, that's the first time that they're actually hearing about, you know, the rich histories and traditions of Latin America. So I'm wondering, like, what Cuba does to preserve that for the youth. Because now we're seeing the change, especially in California, we're seeing a focus on having ethnic studies become part of curriculum for K through 12, for high school and all the other ones. So I'm wondering how Cuba does that at those levels for youth. Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, they're the ones who are going to continue the revolution, right? So I'm wondering what that looks like.
So you were mentioning something like popular education, and we have to understand the differences between the educational system of Cuba and the other Latin American countries where the popular education flourished and have success. Even though we have free education for all, we have communitarian projects with the implementing this type of pedagogical system as popular education. So in that sense, people will be receiving lessons in their classes, but at the same time they will learn about the community and how to interact, not in a very restricted or fixed way of schools. Every school have schedules, hours, exams, paperwork to do, and popular education work with the interaction of people, and we have had that experience also at Icap. Kenia invited those professors to come to Icap and to have this kind of workshops of the popular education, because in that way we will go back to the subject center, that it is the one that will preserve the revolution, because the goal of the revolution is to work with the subject and put it in the center of the hurricane or the situation. So that is what we are looking for. And there are different youth organizations that combine in the Young Communist League, and they had their congress a few months ago, and one of the topics that the young people were discussing is how to work to preserve the achievements that we had, but how to move forward and to look for other opportunities. And all that has to be achieved through the historical backgrounds that we have. Our leaders have taught us that the past, it is there to be remembered and to take the ideas and not to forget about the history, but also to bring it to the future. And young people will not understand the history if they do not work by themselves. I mean, you will read, you will learn, but you have to work and you have to be activists in order to have a continuation of that history. And sometimes history was taught just in a book, very boring. I mean, I'm not saying that books are boring. I'm saying that when you just focused on a book and you do not go through the white and black letters to the action, you just have a revolution in your head. And there are new and ideas to go back to that history. And I was mentioning the other day some experiences that it is to organize a group of young people and to go to Sierra Maestra and to hike to climb the places, Turquino, where we had our war of independence, or when the revolution triumphed, or to go back to Villa Clara, one of the provinces of Cuba, where we have the monument of Che Guevara, and from Havana, Santiago de Cuba, Che Guevara. I mean, we kept those ideas, but when you go and you see the place where the remains of Che Guevara are, your words from the book goes to your heart. And that is the way we want to preserve the history. But also the elders, or as Kenia likes to say, the people that have accumulated youth, and that speaks not only through the historical dates, but the experience they have, how their relatives felt when they were away, how they risked when they were in the clandestine process. A lot of women were, in fact, the second in command in Santiago de Cuba in the clandestine process was a woman. The same woman, when the revolution triumphed, she became the leader of the Women's Federation. And it is the one who help to build what Kenia was saying, that more about 48% of the members of our parliament are women. So we have to go back to history to understand why we have 48% of women in parliament. And that is a way, at least, that we are trying. It's not difficult in words. It looks very simple, but it's not. We have to, young members, from the different associations have to go to talk to the young people because, well, the films and all that Kenia was saying, sometimes you just see pretty things and you forget about the essence, and that's what we are trying.
We also have one example. We
Yes.
have a network of popular educators in Cuba, and it is very effective. We studied Paulo Freire doctrine. It is Marxist, and we consider it is a good combination for our popular education system, a Cuban style, because everything we adopt to the Cuban system.
Great, gracias.
Sí.
Before I I'm going to take advantage before I give you that, because I have kind of a follow-up question, and I know you're going to answer it. But what a critique that I often hear from people, recently from other people who have gone to Cuba or who are Cubans, who argue that there are a lot of, the same attention they have been given by Senex to deal around transgender people, if that ought to be given to deal with issues around race, and not race, it's a social construction, but after all, the dream of Martí was Cuban for all, and so this is sometimes that's the critic that comes up. And I think that by looking at the number of people who have been hired by the U.S. to undermine the revolution, these days there are women, but also black Cubans. And so that's the issue that has come up, and I wanted to know what you think. That's the critique. Why not make a lot more sensitive around this issue? Because a lot of Cubans would say, that everybody has a grandparent that is black, but I think that that's sometimes a way out of really a complicated issue, but it's a way not to deal with it. And so I wonder what you said, because the last time we had somebody from the Cuban office that came in, and there was a Venezuelan, and so we had this discussion, and I wonder.
Well, first of all, we have recognized that the revolution have been very, very active in eliminating all kinds of racism, but it is not done yet, first of all. Second, the revolution has been very inclusive, and the achievements for the Cuban people are for all the Cuban people, no matter the color of the skin and so on. Currently, our analysis is going further than that. Is the revolution empowered to change those gaps in a better way? Yes, we are empowered. So it is necessary to mobilize different elements of the Cuban national debate. Parliament, decision makers in the legal framework, but also it has to do with changing people's traditions, things that are in your head that you cannot change in the law, but you should change in the practice, in the everyday life. Also, a debate since the scientific point of view, because we have many opinion leaders in Cuba. Some of them, they consider that when you compare the poor white population with the poor black population in 1959, and you see how much that have they advanced, the white ones are advancing faster. So that's true that still we have areas where we need to encourage some intentional changes in order to be more inclusive. Again, it doesn't mean that we haven't been able to do many things, but we understand and we are revolutionaries, and self-criticism is a very revolutionary thing. And we are clear about that. I have to tell you that one of the target areas for the regime change programs that are financed from the US is exactly the race issue. They are trying to present Cuba as a racist country where people of Afro descendants has the worst living conditions and so on. And I have to tell you, Felix, I'm a Cuban, okay, I'm a member of parliament, but I'm a normal Cuban, and I have to tell you that it is a lie. When you go to Cuba, you see how inclusive we are. In a building, you could find people of all kinds in Cuba, in a neighborhood, in a community, and so on. So the problem is that we should understand that in the new stage of the Cuban Revolution, when these new opportunities are being opened for all the Cubans, and with more people from outside, not only from the US and from other countries, coming to Cuba, that aspect that is so damaging for the unity of the Cuban people is going to appear again and again. And we have to be really conscious about that. Another thing is that we have been participating in many actions in order to claim for the reparation for the Afro-descendant population all over the world, mainly, in the diaspora. And it is something that Cuba has very clear, and in our case, we are having, it is like a committee that was created by the National Union of Writers, UNIAC. It's a Aponte Commission, it is the name that it has, and it is different intellectuals of Cuba with a very revolutionary debate trying to make proposals about that. And they have very good proposals on that. We don't think in an affirmative action. It is not our style. But for instance, if we have more women today in parliament, if we have the average age of people in parliament is 48 years now in Cuba, it means we have a younger parliament. If 68% of this parliament is new compared to the previous one, it is the result of intentional public policies in Cuba. So we are conscious about the need of having similar intentionality, not only for the political participation and the political representation of people of Afro descendants, but also in terms of housing, in terms of access to different, not only to self-employment, because they have access. The problem is that to exercise self-employment, you have to be very well trained and you have to have resources. Who is the people receiving remittances from the United States? Is the black people? No, the white people, mainly. So it's like that cycle of history, Raúl spoke in Parliament about that recently, and he was talking about the historical heritage of knowledge in the hands of the white. La herencia histórica de los conocimientos. I don't know if I say that well. So that's another element. The starting point from the black people is different to the starting point for the white people. So these are things, they are not new for you because you live here in the United States. And another thing, Felix, is not to analyze the Cuban situation in comparison with the situation in the US. It's not similar at all. We have a very different situation, very, very different situation. And believe me, in Cuba, not only because it is in the Constitution, no, because it is in practical life. In Cuba, you don't see police brutality. Not only against black, no, against anyone in Cuba. So here I understand that there are many other issues connected to that question of race, but in Cuba it is a very different situation, and the Cuban Revolution has been the main achievement for the black people in Cuba and for the white people and the people of all kinds of races, although I know that race is an artificial construction. And another thing has to do with LGTB. That's true that they have more visibility, but that's true that the discrimination was stronger, deeper. We are a Latino country, we are male chauvinist. Still today, Felix. I remember being in Los Angeles 20 years ago, and here in San Francisco, Strawberry and Chocolate, the film, to be here in the films, in the theaters, and everybody asking me about that. What do you think about strawberry and chocolate? And I have to tell you that 20 years after, we are in a very different place. We are more open, we are more respectful. It's different to be tolerant. We are not looking for tolerance, we are looking for respect. We have been able to organize, the National Center for Sexual Education, CENESEX, is organizing actions against homophobia, jornadas contra la homofobia, like 11 times now. 11 years. Imagine in the center of Havana, in the center of Santiago, in the center of many cities, transgender and other members of the and in the Carmel Theater, the main theater of Cuba, where Fidel, Raúl, and the leaders of the country used to go to address the big crowds. That's where the LGBTQ networks and people go and organize a big parade. Some people said, well, but Mariela is the daughter of Raúl Castro. You know, it is. We are very active today. I'm very proud of that. I feel that in the new family code that we are going to approve in Parliament, it is going to be the family code for Cuba in the year 2016. It is not going to be the previous one because Cuba had advanced a lot, and there are many other things that will advance in the future, in these areas and others, of course.
Resides in the early 2000s when Fidel spoke about the battle of ideas, and which I think truly helped Chavez embark on such a big stage and the major changes, not just in the Americas, but in our world. And so when Fidel was talking, in such detail about the battle of ideas and where are we going as humanity, I'm often asked by people here in this country, when they're thinking about traveling to your country, Cuba, there's a constant narrative that comes out saying, I need to get there before it changes. I need to get to Cuba before the blockade drops and the U.S. changes everything, right? And as the compañero shared, there's a huge confidence in Cuba, not just because of your ideas, but you're planning for the last 50 years around ensuring that foreign influences aren't going to change the dynamics of the revolutionary process. And that helps me sleep at night, knowing that, my answer is like, well, just go, and it's, they have a plan. The Cubanos are planning, My question from Fidel's speeches around the battle of ideas is now, as the blockade is changing, or we're starting to begin a new dynamic in relationships, is I'm finding myself struggling with the idea of the battle of influences, and in talking about like how is the U.S. influencing the culture of Cuba? I want to know, and my question is based on please help us. My intention with this is help us as a country here. How is Cuba planning on preparing or planning to influence us with the great works that you've done, both through such like cinema, music, dance, medicine, education, economics, ideology, and so forth? Sports, thank you. Like what are you all talking about around when we begin to engage in deeper relationships, how are you all going to help influence us and educate us? Because we have a shitload of work to do here that we need a lot of help, right? And I'm also asking that question or sharing that question because I know we here are the ones that need to do most of that work, right? But you all have a lot to teach us. And so is there conversations, is there a plan to be like, okay, when things open up, we're gonna, bring conferences here, Cubanos can come out here and bring us together and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Did that make sense?
Yeah. Leima was a personal participant in the Battle of Ideas in the social work program.
Well, the Battle of Ideas that Fidel initiated, as you were mentioning, brought the Cuban, the young people to what we call to the streets. I mean, to go out the university and the classrooms, to go to the communities, to know what were the difficulties in housing, what were the difficulties in the families that had kids with different capacities or that they couldn't handle by their own, or if they were having single mothers with 3, 4 kids. So all that social research was done by university students from different careers. And after that, we founded the program of social workers. So thousands of those people that we found in the communities that were not studying or working were the ones that had ended as social workers, because who knows the problem of the communities? And who are the ones who are going to solve it in a better way? The ones that suffered that situation. So we revert the situation of the young people at that time. We offer them jobs. We offer them study, so they were transforming the society. It is true that we have influence. We are in a, as we always say, in a globalized world that everybody is influencing everybody, but you should influence without interference, without trying to be injerencista, I don't know.
Yeah. Subversive.
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 I mean, that's why we have been calling all our friends and the people we are meeting in the States to go through ethical travels. I mean, it is to go to Cuba, to enjoy your time there, to exchange the culture, but not trying to go there because, I mean, I come from the US, I know how you have to solve the problems, I bring a box of, as Kenia say, a box of dollars for you to fix this mess that you have here. No, that is what we call everybody, to go there and learn if they need that, they need to learn something. Everybody learns from everybody. And the influence from Cubans to the US, we will do it in the same respect. We won't try to change the system of the US as they were doing to us for so many years. It is true that the influence will come along, I mean, naturally. That is the most beautiful thing, through sports, when the major leagues allowed the Cuban baseball to come here. I mean, because so far our sportmen and women have to defect Cuba so as to get to the major leagues here. So that is unfair, because those people have relatives in Cuba. They like to live in Cuba, but they want to be a successful and a very well-known sport athlete. So it is a conflict that they are pushing the people to take or make these decisions. The influence will come naturally through the exchanges in music performances. A couple of groups have been nominated for the Grammy Award, so Latin. So but we have some Grammy, like our Chucho Valdez and many others, Buenavista Social Club, that, well, there was the first Cuban band living in Cuba, performing in the White House. Obama introduced them and so on. He didn't stay. Probably he doesn't know how to dance. And, well, through this natural exchange, we will have this. Yeah, we have to teach.
Yeah, that's one of the questions. You have to help us learn how to dance.
And through this natural influence, not intervening, but the natural flow of ideas and so on. Now Cuba, Kenia was mentioning, and in general, that our universities are welcoming foreign students, I mean, through scholarships or through, I mean, they pay by their studies. Cubans have been accepted in some scholarship here, so every time you talk to them, you will receive that natural influence. That's
Just one thing to add to what Leima has been saying. I remember the first time Clinton approved the people-to-people licenses. It is interesting to say that Bush immediately suspended the licenses. Why? Because they expected the licenses to be for the brainwashing of the Cuban people. And what really happened is that many of the US people going to Cuba, they just returned like that. Wow, that's not what has been said to me, a complete lie. Cubans are normal, Cubans do not eat babies, That's true.
Yeah.
I'm telling you things that I really see, that I really hear from the people here in the US. I remember people saying that the blockade has to be there because of the missiles pointing to the US coast. And it happened in 1962, the missile crisis. And some people were thinking that, okay, Cuba is a threat because of the missiles there. So when they go to Cuba, some people ask if we have churches in Cuba. And we say, no, not only we have churches, we have all kinds of religion. Go and see. We have a Muslim league in Cuba where Shias and Sunnis are together. A Shia is a president and a Sunni is a deputy president of the league. We have, all Afro religions, Buddhist religions, spirit religions, blah, blah, blah. My God, huge of religions. So why Bush stopped the licenses? Because of that. Because it was a reverse challenge. The thing that they wanted to do to the Cuban society, and remember one detail, it was in the middle of the special period. Remember we had blackouts for 18 hours in Cuba, or 12 hours. Remember it was in the years where we didn't even have food or shoes or clothes, but Cuban didn't stop. We didn't close a hospital, we didn't close a school, we went to the university, our professors were there. We are resilient. And Bush stopped it. What could happen if things change here? I just leave it there. So your question is very important because, like Leima said, we are not looking for any kind of influence, but watch out. Some people here is very, very worried about you to see Cuba.
Right.
So your reaction to that is your reaction. I leave it there.
You raise your hand, Jason raised his hand, the compañeros raised their hand. And but I just have to, I'm going to, my reflection is that the last questions have been only asked by men. So I'm just putting that out. Okay, so I just need to put that out. So can you quickly ask your question?
I will quickly ask my question. As you know, here in this country, African people, African descendant people have had to fight for everything that we've gained, from slavery to against Jim Crow, etc. Throughout the 60s, a lot of our revolutionary leaders from the Black Panther Party, the Black Liberation Army, many of them languish in jails inside of the U.S. today. Some 2.3 million people are incarcerated, many of them political prisoners in the U.S. One of our most famous, our sister Assata Shakur, was able to escape and get to Cuba. And recently a $2 million reward has been put out on her. So it may be more now, but yes. So obviously, we have a concern about that, but just the view of the political prisoner situation here, and particularly Cuba's relationship to Assata Shakur or any other of those, what we call freedom fighters, because our community is still under siege by police. Any of those freedom fighters that remain in Cuba?
Well, when we make a decision, we make a decision. We are guided by principles. She received a political refugee status, and that's all. I said our internal decisions are not in any table of debate or negotiation. It is very clear, and our government have been very clear about that. We know that there are many people here interested in just finding some solutions to what they call the political
not the political prisoners, los prófugos.
People that escape from
Yeah.
police.
Yeah.
Exile.
Yeah, but in that case, it is clear our position, and of course, it belongs to the history of the Cuban Revolution, our very revolutionary positions in our foreign affairs policy, and of course, in the future, Cuba has many other things to do in terms of accepting people coming to Cuba with different conditions, but of course, we are very proud of that. We are not going to say that it is not correct. No, it is correct that our government, if she is in the requisites to classify for that, and it was given to her, more than welcome for us, and it is the position of the Cuban Revolution. No change on that.
I can defer to someone else. I mean, I do have a question, but
Go ahead.
it's a big question.
This is a question that I probably should have got the answer. We went to Cuba in the summer, and one of the most impressive things I saw was they have maternity clinics for women to stay, like high-risk women. You know, high risk might be you might be too skinny, you need some more nutrition, high blood pressure. It doesn't have to be really a big risk. You stay there your whole pregnancy. They allow you to have the maternity clothes. You get 3, 4, 5, 6 meals a day. There was 6 meals a day you get, small snacks and nutritious. You see a dietitian, you see a nutrition, you get your hair done. Wow. And they even had menopause program at that same facility. And every municipality had the facility for the women for pregnancy, and a hospital near, so that you go from that place to have your baby. And the infant mortality rate is so low, it's like the lowest in the world, I think, in Cuba. So my wonder is why a rich country doesn't adopt or get somebody like to counsel on how you get this done. It's all free. It's all, so is it the money? And so they withhold it, because it can't be just the knowledge, because all they have to do is ask and emulate what they see in a country that has this kind of success in the world.
Yeah.
And so I was astounded by it. So I wonder why it's not done all over.
Well, that question is for the UN.
Yeah, because.
And well, you described very accurately the situation of our maternity homes. I have to say that we have had this kind of policies during all the years of the revolution, and it has increased during the last years as the Cuban population is aging and our women are becoming professional and they are having less babies. So the aging population and the women having less kids, there is a demographic situation in Cuba. So the attention to pregnant women is not only the responsibility of the Ministry of Healthcare that provides all those things that you are saying, but also is a state policy to guarantee the life of the mother and the kids. And not only in Havana City, where you probably visited as many people go, but you will find the same treatment, the same conditions in any municipality in Cuba. So the budget is distributed and the policy is distributed to all the provinces. And I will go beyond the information that you were given. And it is not only that women are being receiving attention while they are pregnant, but we have programs for the family planning before the pregnancy and after the mother delivers the baby, because women in Cuba have the possibility to have 1 year of maternity leave. So after you give the baby, we as part of the battles of ideas, the research we did in the communities, we discovered that, I mean, the month that the mother had was not enough, because it is important. There is another project that we have that it is breastfeeding. So you need to be near your baby to breastfeeding. You need to give that warm that they need, and you need to do it in a year. But we go beyond that, and it is that if the mother is a professional, and I mean, she can take care of the baby 6 months or something, but she needs to go to work because of a research of, because she earns more money than the husband, so that man can apply for that maternity leave. So instead of the mother being all day in the house, the parents receive money from his work so he can stay with the baby, so the baby is not alone. So these are experiences that Cuba presents every year in the forums that the UN and women's organization have, international speaking, UNESCO and other agencies recognize, and the OMS, WHO recognize that Cuba has done a tremendous work with women, and also with those women that have AIDS.
And for many students in this culture, in this society, it's like the boogeyman, right? Socialism is like a scary monster, a scary monster. No, you know, and in fact,
in the middle of the cultural war.
Yeah. Most people don't have any idea about what socialism even is. You know, the closest maybe they understand it is some small political sect selling a newspaper on campus or something, you know. But now we're in a moment where actually one of the presidential candidates...
Why do you say they are sects?
Because they're...
They are organizations.
Okay. Well, what I mean by that is that they look at, maybe not as sects, but as being sectarian. That's what I really mean, is an organization which is sectarian. But now we have a presidential candidate in the Democratic Party who's actually refers to himself as a socialist, that is Bernie Sanders. And so now seems to be a public conversation about socialism now in a way that hasn't, I've not seen in my life. So I want to just throw it out there in foreground. Well, what is meant by socialism in Cuba?
In Cuba?
Yeah.
First of all, social property as a predominant property. Second, to abolish exploitation of men per another man or women. To redistribute wealth and the plus value that we produce. To have the human being as a central of everything in life. To empower the people to decide by ourselves. To have a sustainable economic model that is able to guarantee the basic things, to guarantee all human rights for everyone, to decide about the foreign affairs and all the external projection of the state, where the state is strong, is a regulator, is strong, has the power to decide and to interfere in people's life. That's socialism in brief, because when I say that, it is not that the state is going to decide by you. But the problem is that we should understand that in the state, when the socialist state is strong, people is more protected. Although you give a bit of your personal, individual sovereignty in order to benefit the collective decisions. That's the situation. And in Latin America today, we have that same debate. What to do about socialism today? How do we do socialism in Latin America? And there is a disjunctive. Even we go for power, to achieve power, or you change the power. These are the two disjunctive. The majority of us think that we should go to conquer the political power and to change it. But in a revolutionary process, you should look for going to achieve and conquer the power. And once you are there, you have to change it in a participative way. Another thing has to do with the role of the social movements. Because in Latin America, the role of the political parties, the traditional political parties, is changing. Many people in Latin America, because of the crisis, in the neoliberal times, people do not believe in the traditional parties, no matter if they are from the left or from the right. So Cuba is an exception on that because the Communist Party of Cuba has been a vanguard party. It is not a people just volunteer to be member of the party. It is selective. But in many other countries, to be member of a Communist Party or to be member of a government, of a party that become the government, is like a clientelismo. You know what I mean? So people is joining this party because they are the government now. So I go there for that party, but it is not because of the ideas, sometimes or many times, but because of going with the winning horse, you know? So that's a challenge for the ideological work and for the battle of ideas in Latin America today. Because another challenge for us is not to replace one elite for the other one. We have to change the participatory process in order to build new ways to administrate public resources. It is not just to substitute one old machinery for a new machinery that is repeating the same laws of neoliberal or capitalist economy. It is, in other ways, to overcome capitalism. Superar el capitalismo? To overcome capitalism. Even in Cuba, 57 years after the triumph of the revolution, and 55 years after declaring a socialist country, we are not socialist yet. We are in a process to transform all the bases of the Cuban economic model into a socialist country and in the future into a communist country. 57 years trying that. So it's not easy. But in my view, it's the only alternative. Capitalism is not the alternative for anything. It is just selfishness, competition, I don't know, capitalism. You don't have to build capitalism. Capitalism appears everywhere. What you build is socialism. Because human beings, we are born very selfish, very competitive. We want to be stronger in order to defeat another person. It's the nature. But in socialism, you educate people. You transform people's behavior in common behaviors. You teach people how to put common things first, and then it is you. And it is not easy. It is not easy. But that's my view. We have to explain, and there is not any dogma. That's another mistake we have committed in the past. Just to look to the manuals and to the manuals and just to copy here from here. No. In Latin America, at least in Latin America where we live, it is necessary to be creative. For instance, in Bolivia and Ecuador, the situation with indigenous movements is particular. It's not the same what happening in Brazil. That's the Movimiento Sin Tierra over there, and also the indigenous population, the Afro-descendants. So what I mean, every country is needing to design their own kinds of socialism. The good thing is that we all agree that that's the path. Socialism is the path. But we are ready to have a very deep debate. Another thing has to do with the leaders of this debate. In the past, the leaders belonged to the social movement. Once they achieved the political power, some of those leaders moved to be ministers or members of parliament or the president of a country, and now the social movements are like left behind in the public debate for socialism. And that's another thing that we have to consider. How to continue empowering the social movements currently in order to lead the current debate, not only internally in each country, but in Latin America, in front of this new reactionary position of the right wings in the region, attacking Argentina, attacking Brazil, attacking Venezuela, Ecuador, Bolivia, and all these movements. Of course, Cuba, we are under threat. We achieved victories, but right now there is the intention to recover the spaces that the right-wing forces lost in Latin America a decade ago. It is what is happening today in Latin America. And socialism is being like satanized, you know. Don't go to socialism. Don't vote in Argentina. Don't vote for Scioli because he is going to make a Venezuela here in Argentina. It's something like that. So it is the new situation. It is the battle of ideas. It is the ideological debate that we have to face. But I have no doubt it is the only way possible. It is socialism.
I think you beautifully ended the